Welcome to the Introverted Servant Leader Podcast, a show dedicated to empowering purpose-driven women in corporate leadership to amplify their impact and influence. I'm your host, Sharissa Sebastian Deppen, a leadership and executive coach with over a decade of experience who guides introspective leaders in harmonizing personal aspirations with professional success. In each episode, we'll have thoughtful conversations about leadership, making decisions, embracing growth, and maintaining work-life balance while leading with quiet strength. We're so glad you could join us. Let's redefine leadership together. Welcome to today's episode called When No One Is Watching. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would I pick this title for today's episode? So I'm going to break it down into 3 different steps. Number 1, why it's important that we need to pay attention to what is going on behind the scenes when no one else is watching. And number 2, what you need to know as a result of that. And then number 3, what I call the now what part of the episode, which is, okay, so now that I know this, what do I do with this? How do I put feet to this? How do I make this practical? And how do I get the most benefit out of it? So that is what we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing that I want to cover is that your thoughts or our thoughts lead to our emotions or how we feel about certain things or what's going on. And then that leads to our actions or our decisions, which then leads to the outcomes. And then eventually it leads to our destiny. So I'll say that one more time. It starts with our thoughts. So whatever we're thinking and the meaning that we're giving what's in front of us and what we're experiencing leads to how we feel about whatever that is. So leads to our emotions, which then is going to have an impact in our actions or our decisions, which then, of course, is going to have an impact on the outcome, whatever that outcome is. And then eventually, all of that leads towards our destiny or the direction which we're headed. So what you focus on expands. And what we internalize has a way of surfacing, especially during times of stress. So you might have heard that analogy of, when you squeeze an orange, right? So as an example, what comes out is whatever's in the inside. And so it's the same with us, right? When you squeeze us or put us under, some amount of stress, whatever is inside, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, our emotions, all of those things are going to bubble up at some point in time. There's only so much that we can suppress, for a certain amount of time before things start to come out, right? And so that's why we're talking about this today, because even when no one is watching, whatever it is that's going on in your mind and the emotions that you're allowing yourself to experience as a result of the meaning that you're giving what's happening to you is going to have an impact on how you show up. It's going to be felt by people before it's even seen or heard. And it's going to have an impact on what you choose to say and do and decisions you make, how you approach people, how you interact with others, all of those kinds of things. So that's why we're talking about this. And that is why this is so important. So if you want to create a legacy, or if you're working on, say, your professional brand and how you want to be remembered, it all starts with your thoughts. So remember that your thoughts lead to those emotions which will influence your actions. So that's all great, right? And it's good to know, and hopefully that's eye-opening, or maybe it's just a reminder for you to just be intentional about your actions and be really careful about what you allow in your mind, to stand guard at the door of your mind, because that is, everything is going to flow from that, right? From your beliefs, from your thoughts, all of that. So having said all of that, that's the one thing I want to mention, first of all, is just the intentionality behind it. Now that you know what you know, it is going to be so important for you to heighten your level of awareness of how you're showing up, and even internally, right? Not just how you're showing up in front of other people, but being really intentional. So for me, how I feel can be a warning for me to stop and pay attention to my thoughts. So if I feel myself getting stressed, frustrated, angry, maybe being internally judgmental of myself or of others, I interrupt that pattern as soon as I become aware of it and choose things like gratitude, asking for forgiveness. So for me, that would be prayer, first of all, and then just going through that process for asking for forgiveness. Maybe it's taking a few deep breaths. Sometimes that's all it takes to keep us really grounded and to get back to a place where we can focus and be centered again. And then the other thing is prayer. So you can go into a space of prayer. This for me is probably one of the most powerful ways that I can pull myself back from going into that spiral of anger, frustration, all of those other things. Another thing that you could do is taking a walk, getting some fresh air, removing yourself from that environment that might be causing you that stress and all of that. And then it's maybe listening to music, right? Listening to uplifting music, listening to worship music, or anything that will help you to get centered and get back to a more resourceful state. So these are some of the things that I do and I practice. And I use that word practice intentionally because it is something that, it comes more naturally as you practice it. The more you create a healthy habit around these things, the easier it is going to be for you to walk yourself back from that level of frustration and to make sure those emotions are in check so you can make better decisions for yourself and for others. So it's not always easy, but the more you train yourself into this pattern of behavior, the easier it will get. And it becomes second nature after a while. Now also remember that who you surround yourself with matters. One of my favorite quotes is by Jim Rohn, who said, "You are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with." So make sure that you choose wisely. If you're looking for a like-minded community of introverted servant leaders, we've got you. Stay tuned to find out more about our exclusive community. And with that, as we wrap up, just know I'm rooting for you and praying for you, and you've got this. If you loved this episode and want more, I invite you to find out more about my exclusive high-level 8-week mastermind for introverted servant leaders who are women in corporate leadership. You can find out more by going to leadershipmasteryalliance.com/LMA. The link will be in the show notes below. Use code PODCAST for a massive discount just for listening today. That's all for this episode of the Introverted Servant Leader Podcast. I hope you found value in our discussion around leadership for introverted servant-hearted women thriving in the corporate space. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you left a review, subscribed to the show, and shared it with fellow purpose-driven leaders. Your reviews and shares help amplify the influence of introverted leaders worldwide. I look forward to connecting further on the next episode as we continue to redefine wise, compassionate leadership together. Until then, lead with grace, embrace your strength, and remember, your quiet leadership is a force that shapes the world. Take care and stay inspired.